right. Well, welcome. I am thrilled to have with me the most decorated Winter Olympian in US history, Apolo Ono. And he is also doing some incredible things now that he'll, I'm sure, tell you a little bit more about. But I'm so thrilled that you're here, Apollo. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Well, I know you and I have talked a little bit about some of the most important things that athletes should know and are maybe to keep in mind as they're in this current situation with COVID and as potentially as they transition away from sports altogether. And so there's so much. But one of the things that I thought was really powerful that you were talking about is kind of like the self leadership aspect. And I know that you're kind of the expert on transitioning away from sport, being the top of your game. So, what would you share? What would you say are some of the most important things for athletes to know right now?
Well, yeah, thanks. I don't think I'm the expert in transitioning from sport, but I am a participant in transitioning from sport. I always call it a lifelong participant.
Yeah.
Um, I think, first and foremost, as we talk about transition from sport, it's important to recognize, I think, first and foremost, the challenges associated with the identity crisis that will occur.
Mhm.
And for some athletes, this may or may not come as a realization, or you may have actually heard this in the past from friends or family or other athletes who've gone through the same type of transitioning challenges, but it doesn't feel real until you go through it.
I bet. Yeah.
And, I had been told even in my career that I needed to prepare for when sport was no longer the priority in my life to be a
Mhm.
competitive Olympic athlete, and that it was going to serve as a simple chapter, a powerful chapter, but it's just one chapter in which I would be able to recall upon to utilize those insights and life experiences as I progressed throughout the rest of my career and other decisions that would come up in my life.
Mhm.
But it was a very real challenge, and it's been in part a big inspiration for me to write about these things. Yeah, I know you were talking about this book that I've been working on called Hard Pivot,
Mhm.
and the correlation between what an athlete will go through and also what most of America is going through, or even as the organization and even institutions that we've seen are having to face these very incredibly challenging and difficult hard pivots that they're forced to create and make, and
Right.
also the reinvention that occurs of that identity that has to happen. So, you know it I never want to be one to kind of stand on a pedestal and say this is the tactics and tools and strategies that will give you the career path and the success that you desire. It's a lot of work. And
Mhm.
I think first and foremost, presenting it in that way to say this is going to be hard.
Mhm.
For some people it's easier, but I think in general we could say this is a hard decision. This is a hard path. It it gets easier because you become more familiar with the uncertainty and the uncomfortable aspects of what you will need to go through. And
Mhm.
in that resolve and how you find that resolve is a reservoir of potential that you have displayed and explored during an athlete career. And now it's just a different area. So, I like to talk to athletes and say, look, like what you are doing right now, if you are still competitive with a potentially long-standing career ahead of you in sports, like live it, be present, attack it with everything that you have, do the work necessary, always question and seek ways to become the best version of yourself. In the actual process of doing that as well, realize that these attributes and core skill sets that you will be developing are going to be transferable into the next career path. So
Mhm.
start to identify other parts of your personality that maybe look as more general aspects instead of just saying, I'm really good at turning a corner on my right leg. Well,
Mhm.
I don't know if that's going to be relevant, Apollo, as you grow through the next phase in your life. But zooming out from that, what does that actually mean? Right. Because zooming in, I'm great at pivoting on the ice, going 30 plus miles an hour and passing athletes.
Right.
Well, I don't know if that's really that good unless maybe you're on the highway, right? And you're passing other cars. But for the most part, I don't know what the correlation here is until I zoom out. And then when I zoom out, I say, well, you've been very good at pivoting. You're
Mm,
very good at hurtling towards one direction. And then the snap of fingers, you have to change direction very quickly and almost violently in a way that that momentum and velocity can also propel you further down whatever that decision was. So
mm,
again, start to prepare yourself for what the career and what the life will be like when you are no longer dedicated towards, you know, becoming your best version of yourself in sport. And then the next phase is the identification process,
mhm,
having the radically transparent conversation with yourself in the mirror and being able to a accept yourself for who you are, the mistakes, the shortcomings, the insecurities, and then begin the chance to start working at that. So whatever you were using as fuel as an athlete, whether it was pain, whether it was pure alpha, whether
mhm,
you are someone who is deeply in fear of failure, you can use all those things as levers as you propel through the next phase of your life. So
mm.
I'll stop there because that was kind of a very long answer, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm fascinated by this topic and human behavior and the neuroscience and the psychology behind our decision processes. So
Well, I love that. And you said so many important things. And the first thing about zooming out and being able to actually take inventory of how, maybe what you're doing in your sport can actually be applicable to your life. I think that's so powerful because I've heard from way too many athletes that they don't have transferable skills. And that's the biggest misconception, I think,
right.
that an athlete might have. And then also, when you're talking about getting really honest with yourself and looking in the mirror and having the hard conversation, I think that's a challenge. Like, people don't usually like to do that. And especially to look at the things that maybe you are viewing as, growing edges or something that you're not very adept at. But also bringing your athlete approach to that. Like, how can I get better? So I think that's super powerful. And I know you've also been a proponent of, mental health for athletes and things. And so I wanted to just loop that in because I think that's an important piece. And also, as a licensed therapist, that's something that I'm always really conscious of. Um, you know, what would you say to athletes who maybe are wondering if there's a little bit more going on for them than just like regular transition process and, this is hard for everybody?
Sure. What? So first off, I think it's critical that we recognize that not everyone has the same experiences on the cerebral level. So the
Yes,
conversations and the dialogue that you have with yourself is unique to you.
totally.
And if you feel that that dialogue potentially has some habit forming or really negative aspect where you keep coming back to a place where it's really difficult to just function, know
Mm,
that you don't have to have that dialogue with only yourself. That's the first thing, is I think that there are many very capable people and resources available to you. Forget about the athlete side, just available to you as a person
right.
to help you through whatever it is that you're going through. And, you know, also realize that as an athlete, most likely you have been conditioned to not ask for help. You have been conditioned to not show weakness or insecurity or these fears, perhaps, that you have, or that you just are feeling way off on
Mhm.
the most simplistic explanation. And you don't have to do that alone. And I think that that's first and foremost, right? Is just like when you were going through your career, you would bounce ideas off of your teammates, off of your loved ones, and even off of your coach.
Right.
And your brain and your mental state should be absolutely no different. In fact, it should be actually identical. You need to have these open conversations. You need to get comfortable opening up and wearing that vulnerability. And it is then that you will feel this weight vest being lifted off of your chest and off of your shoulders in a way that will truly allow you to kind of spread your wings, so to speak, and be able to go and explore this world the way that it was meant to be. But it's not until you're willing to go and have that conversation. So you need to
Mm,
make that decision. You need to make that choice. And you need to also recognize that you are able to make that choice. You have the ability to decide how you have these conversations and who you have them with. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of this has to do with who you vibe with and if you click with that person, but
Right.
sometimes it's just really all about making sure that you can get someone who is and has access to that person who is validated, that person who is a licensed therapist, that person who understands on the psychological level of how to communicate with you to begin having these deeper conversations. And that's when the healing begins. And that's when the progress of that inching forward can actually happen.
Yeah, well, I love that. And it's so valuable to be able to really shine the light of awareness on your own internal dialogue. Because I think sometimes things just run and we try to either suppress or not pay attention or, numb out in some way.
Mhm.
And so really, I think that that's a brave thing to take a look at what it is that you're running in your mind and then have those conversations, like you said. So thank you so much for your time, Apollo. I really appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. And I know that you've got a bunch of stuff going on. ApolloOno.com is your website, right? And you also do speaking. And I saw that you have a podcast coming out.
Yeah. So I'll tell you just briefly,
Yeah.
Erica, just kind of what I've been focused on. So when I retired, I said yes to everything and I tried to explore the world. I was very hungry for knowledge. I believed in full immersion in the different businesses and opportunities that I was seeking. And I
Mm,
would say within the last, so that happened for about 7.5 years. And the past 2.5, 3 years, I've been spending much more time here in the States and
mhm,
focused on things that I believe to be a part of my purpose. And my
mm,
purpose meaning is to shine light, to help people recognize their own inner power, to help them transition, to guide them through a reinvention, and to help them realize that life is going to be a series of hard pivots. It is a combination of getting knocked down and rising again over and over again in a stronger version of who you are. And I'm passionate about writing about that. I'm passionate about speaking about that. And I also believe deeply in the philosophical, the purpose driven, and also the mindset related approach that we can face on a personal basis and also on a organization and institutional basis. So whether you
mm,
are working in a large scale organization, you and how you perform on a day-to-day basis, a lot of that has to do with how you perceive this world, the challenges
mm,
that you have. Are you an eternal optimist to the point where perhaps maybe it detracts away from the reality, right? Are you the garage band member who believes he or she is going to be amazing? And maybe you need to hear the pessimistic view sometimes of the cold hard truths, and how you deal with that is a large part of, I think, gauging your overall happiness index. We are
mm,
all, I think, complicit in our self-sabotage in our own careers and path. And
mhm,
maybe whether we receive those small goals that we set on a day-to-day basis. But I am passionate about that. It's what I believe in. It's what I love to do. I speak about this almost every single day. I
mhm,
am consistently fascinated and driven by just the power of the human spirit and really the human mind. And
mhm,
for those athletes who are listening, the things that you have been able to go through as an athlete, to have instantaneous feedback on a day-to-day basis that gives you light or gives you directional, I guess, net compass in a
mhm,
way, is because of your ability to go beyond what you previously thought was possible. And your uncomfortable attributes, the attributes that garner hunger and desire to reach for, not for things that are not within reach, in its kind of short-term time frame.
yeah.
Those are the same types of skill sets that you are going to require for you to have a successful and a happy and a purposeful driven life. And so while the context of those skills will be different, you will still be required to do things that are hard. You will still be required to go into areas that are uncertain and uncomfortable. And the
Mhm,
more that you train yourself and to realize, hey, I've done this before. I know how to do this in terms of my drive, in terms of just the simple, fundamental, let's go get after it. It's going to be hard work. I may suck for 6 months straight, but I'm going to seek progress versus perfection. And that
Yes.
starts here. That starts nowhere else. I don't care how much school you've got. Doesn't matter how smart this paper or IQ is giving you in terms of data. This is your governing model. This is the speed limit, governor.
Hmm.
And know that you can achieve some extraordinary things, but it's going to require the same, if not more, level of work and discipline and consistency that it did in sport. And you're just going to have to monitor and just adjust and recalibrate at times. But you have the skill sets that many people around this world are working towards right now. You have them
Hmm.
innately because of sport, and that is a tremendous advantage. Don't ever throw that away, and know that you can become resilient and strong. So
I
that's kind
love
of
it.
my thoughts. Yeah,
Yes. Well, Ian, when you said like helping athletes realize their purpose and, having that maybe not being a simple road, but purpose is something that by its very nature ignites you. So it's not going to be something that you're doing that you hate, and so that's kind of the other side of things that I think is important too, to highlight for people, because I know, the loss of sport can be a loss. And so it's not going to be you're moving to something that you hate and everything that you said, because that's totally just, I love it. I love your take on things. It's so incredibly enlightening. So I so appreciate you for being here and taking the time and sharing
of course.
with us and with me. And I'll look forward to watching all of the great things that you have on board and all of the people that you're inspiring and with your message and with all of the work that you've been putting in.
Thanks, Erica. As long as we got to keep showing up.
That's right. I love it. Well, thanks so much, Apollo.
Thank you.
All right.